Hey there, welcome back to another episode of the Elevation Association Podcast Experience Podcast. I'm getting it all mixed up. We're your hosts, Dr. Jared Hill, Dr. Dan Nelson. Welcome back. So today, on today's podcast, we are jumping into something that we know really, really well, and something that we really like to talk about. We're going to get into some specifics about leadership roles. And every dentist, just like an expedition, is a little cliche, but just like an expedition, or if you're going on to climb a mountain, you need to have two essential leaders. You need to have one who sees the summit and one that builds the trail to get there, right? So we're going to talk about the purpose of having a visionary and an integrator. We're going to talk about why both roles matter, how you as a dentist can identify. Well, talking is hard today, brother. Whew. How dentists can identify which role they naturally fit, and then how fulfilling roles elevate culture, profitability, and long-term sustainability.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, Dan. This is probably one of the biggest momentum changes in my career as a dentist and as a practice owner. Understanding the difference between the different leadership styles and understanding what my style was, and that allowed me to not feel bad for not being both styles, and understanding the value of having both an integrator and a visionary in your practice. Matter of fact, the necessity of having both, and that's, I think, maybe one of the biggest reasons why dentists struggle and burn out so much, is because they're trying to play both roles,
Yeah.
and very few people can play both roles really well. So it
Yeah.
would be fun to get into this, talk about this. As you listen, think about what your strengths are, if you identify as one or the other, and then at the end we'll probably put a link in so you can take a quiz that we can offer to help you figure out whether you're a visionary or an integrator.
Yeah, we'll definitely put that in. I mean, this really is the leadership framework that built Elevation Association. It's grown multiple multi-million dollar practices, not just practices, but businesses. So it works across the board. And it's what keeps your group or your team or your practice or whatever organized. And it's got to start at the top, right? So you have to have these specific roles both filled or identified and filled, and it's super important. Jared, you're a bit more visionary than I am. So, and Jared and I figured this out early, well, not early on, but we figured out which roles we play and where our strengths are. Jared, you're a lot more visionary than integrator. Um, will you talk first of all a little bit about like what a visionary is, and then, you know, is one more important than the other?
Sure. So as you sit down and as we define these two roles, it's often easier to talk about the visionary first, because that's the more maybe the one that has the more appeal to it, or it seems sexier, right?
It seems sexy. Yeah, for sure. It seems somehow it seems more appealing for some reason.
Sometimes it seems more important. When in actuality, it's not. There's not one that's more important than the other. As a matter of fact, often visionaries fail at a lot of things because they don't have an integrator to put these ideas into process. Whereas an integrator will at least keep things running and going and keep the lights on, even though they may not be going anywhere. So, yeah, let's start with the visionary and what that means. The visionary is really the practice dreamer. He's the strategist. He's kind of the storyteller. He or she is the person that sees the possibilities or sees the path maybe before other people see it. And they're the big picture thinker, right? They generate ideas. They generate idea after idea. They're sitting in the shower thinking ideas come to their. At least that's where I do my best thinking, is in the shower. Marin often wonders why I take 20-minute, 30-minute showers, and I'm like, yeah, that's where my thoughts come in. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the heat or the steam or whatever it is, but you know, they're also oftentimes the relationship builder. They're the person that often talks and collaborates well with other people and talks to them, and they garner ideas or garnish ideas from other people. They're often an optimist because they're not a good integrator. They don't see the numbers. They don't see the daily aspects of. So everything's a possibility, they're often comfortable with risk. So, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, we can do that. It's risky, but at the end of the day, it's always worth it to a visionary. Um, they're they often make emotionally driven decisions. Um, based upon feelings, based upon the moment. They should do this, they should do that, without backing it with data. Mostly, probably because they may or may not understand the value of data driven decisions. And they're inspired oftentimes, I would say, by the future. They're always looking ahead to the future. What's it going to look like in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Some famous visionaries you can probably relate to are like Walt Disney. Walt was, if you can dream it, you can do it. I think that's Disney's saying, right? And so he was a huge dreamer. He created, Disneyland and also everything that has to do with Disney. Steve Jobs, the iPhone, like he was a visionary. So there's these the visionaries are often the popular ones that you hear about. They're the ones that often make the conversation. Um, Even though behind every visionary, or see, even that phrase, not even behind the visionary, but alongside the visionary, is an incredibly important integrator that one tells the visionary, look, these those 10 ideas are great. But here's what we're gonna do. Only one of them is really good. Only one of them is gonna work, and they take that and they drive that forward, and they keep the visionary on track in that way. So it's fun being a visionary. I'll say I love I love coming up with ideas. I love coming up with thoughts and processes, and I love that. I don't like being told that my ideas sometimes are bad. Even though I need that. I didn't realize that I needed that at first, and so to have somebody say, you know what, let's put a pin in this and come back to it, never, is a great thing that is good for me. And so, it's that's what a visionary looks like. And before I realized what the difference between a visionary and integrator was, I felt bad that I couldn't implement my ideas. I just, whatever it is inside me, I just have a hard time taking the next step. I have the idea, it's a great idea, but to take it and move it forward and continue, it's just not me. It wasn't really until you got here, Dan, and until we got Ryan, that a lot of those vision ideas came to pass.
Yeah, I think I don't know what I think it's just the name alone, right? Visionary. You're like, oh, this guy's a visionary, because I think it in as it applies to business and history, we use the word visionary to really, I mean, those are people that changed the world. Oh, he was a visionary in what he did, and the all of this um fanfare that comes with this idea of being a visionary. And the reality is that both are equally important, like you said. But the visionary, when I look at myself, when I look at you, when I look at other visionaries, it's always fun. I love working with other visionaries because the ideas start rolling. And sometimes that's bad. If you have two visionaries together, like you and I have done it before, we get like, yeah, this will be awesome. We'll go and we'll do this thing that, we're going to Turks and Caicos and we're going to go build a practice in Turks and Caicos and we'll fly people in and it'll be amazing. And then someone like, in our heads, we build up this thing to be amazing. And then finally someone that has, some common sense on the situation walks in. They're like, you know how much that's going to cost? We're like, what? No money. What? Like, and then we call them dream crushers, right? They come in and they crush our dreams and you're like, oh, you just ruined our day. But I mean, the reality of that situation is that if you're only an integrator, like you said, your head can get in the clouds a little bit and you
Only
can get,
you're only visionary.
what's that?
You're only a visionary. You said
Yeah.
integrator, but
Oh yeah. Visionary. That's yeah. Yeah. But yeah, you can just end up with your head in the clouds and not get a whole lot of feet on the ground movement, right? So it can be tough. And I think that there's some examples in a dental practice where you can see where a visionary is really important though. And it's like creating the 10-year vision, designing the brand, designing the patient experience, creating the culture within the practice, having the vision to start new services. Visionaries are very good at creating relationships and reaching out and generating networks. And so this leads to strategic partnerships, and then having some impact within the community, or looking for philanthropical opportunities. These are all parts of keys that a visionary can bring to the table, and it's super important. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things that was really cool about coming here was your idea about elevation association, right? It didn't have a name back then, but and I mean, I think it was within the first week you were like, yeah, I've always wanted to do a thing where we get some docs together here, we have a destination, and create a group that can exchange ideas freely without fear of judgment, and allow themselves to be vulnerable and support each other. I was like, man, that's freaking awesome, and it's I'm almost 50-50 visionary integrator, which I thought was weird because I'm such an ADHD kid. And what was cool is that your vision, and you've been able to do this since we've been working together. You've always got these great ideas, and you'll come with this like, hey, I read this thing, I heard. I was like, man, where's he always coming up with all these freaking awesome ideas? But for me, it feeds me, and it definitely feeds that visionary side, but also like feeds my integrator side, where it's like, oh, I can take and I can let's make that happen. Unfortunately, I think in my situation, I'm a ready, shoot, aim kind of visionary integrator, which again, I don't know if that's great either.
No, that's yeah, that's exactly right. And like, it's been having you come on and just taking the ideas and really saying, yes, we can do that. As a visionary, I'm like, okay, but can we? It's a great vision. When we actually sit down to do it, yeah, I really I need you and other people to kind of drive it. So the visionary is one of the points of the summit. Like that. That's where I want to go. And to an integrator, like pure integrator, they're like, oh, I didn't even think about it as a possibility. And not that that's a bad thing, but it's just there's often times where my wife is an integrator through and through, and a visionary, and it took us a while to figure that out. But she used to feel bad for not coming up with ideas. She's like, I
Mm,
don't, I just didn't even think about it, and she's like, and I'm like, that's not your role. Like you are so strong at taking the vision and saying this is going to work or this is not going to work, and here's why.
yeah.
And helping us avoid huge pitfalls, and then also helping us climb huge peaks to get to the summits that that maybe I pointed out or thought that maybe we could get to, and the together is where the magic happens. So Dan, speaking of integrator, why don't you describe what an integrator is, and some attributes of an integrator, and maybe what an integrator does in a dental practice?
Yeah, I mean, so the integrator is the operational backbone, right? It's the person who takes the dream and builds the system and makes it real. Like you were saying, it's the one that helps the dream to become a reality. And I really want to hit on the integrator in this podcast. Jared and I were talking beforehand, before we started recording. We're like, man, do we separate it and do two separate ones because of the importance of understanding each role? And really, they need to be talked about together. That's why we ended up doing it with both. But I really am going to hit home a couple points about an integrator, and why an integrator is so important. But typically an integrator is disciplined. They have a lot of structure in their life. They love processes. They tend to be pretty calm under pressure. They're pretty logical in as a decision maker. They'll kind of, which for us dreamers, that we hate logic. Like it's like, oh, why are you bringing logic to the table? That's that dream crusher mentality, unfortunately, but it's also a huge necessity. They're the masters of accountability. They help you to cut through the noise and get down to the nitty gritty and what really matters. And then, like we were saying earlier, they really have the ability to turn ideas into action. So, and there's a quote by Norman Schwarzkopf, General Norman Schwarzkopf, that I like a lot. And he says, the truth of the matter is you always know the right thing to do. The hard part is doing it. And holy crap, do we see that all the time, right, Jared? Like, how many offices do we work with? They know what they need to do. I'm thinking of one specifically right now who has come to us multiple times and said, I know, I need to do, these things. It's just, I know I need to get it done, but they have a really hard time because they're visionary to get it done. I think that this happens very commonly. And the problem is almost universal, and this is what I want to drive home, is that they lack an integrator in the office, or they have an integrator that either hasn't been identified or hasn't been empowered. So this is huge. I cannot beat this drum loud enough. If you are stalling out, if you are having a hard time getting traction with A, B, or C in your practice, if you're struggling with growth, if you're not doing well with processes, protocols, systems, whatever, if you're just stagnant, if there's a lot of conflict in your office, you probably lack an integrator. Or if you have one, you have not enabled them. So this is massive, massive, massive. I would venture to get, I don't know, Jared, what do you think? How many offices do you think really know what role of the people that they have, what roles they have, even in themselves as a dentist? How many of them do you think know if they're an integrator or a visionary?
Oh, it's low. Maybe 1 out of 10. Maybe, you know,
Maybe, right?
and I say that just because of all the offices of people that we've talked to. Um, you don't know what you don't know. So like I didn't know this concept existed, that there were several roles, a couple roles, visionary, integrator, that are both necessary in a practice. Like, and so that's something that's something when I finally read that in Traction from Gino Wickman, like the biggest light bulb just went off. And it was it's such an inspirational moment that I was like, wow, why, why do we not talk about this more? You know, so I think about the days before you came in, before Riot Game, which are when it was just me, a visionary for 10 years by myself. I'll tell you what I didn't have. I didn't have an accountability chart, because integrators are the ones that create the accountability charts. A visionary, that's overwhelming for me. I said, "Oh man, I'm not," and so I didn't have any meaningful meetings. Occasionally we would get going with a meeting. We'd run it for a week or so for a couple minutes in the morning, and then other than that, surprisingly enough, we would just show up and work and then go home. Like the visionary doesn't do meetings very well. They don't keep going. I didn't have I didn't know what a KPI was. I didn't understand that KPI stood for key performance indicator. I didn't have any scorecards. I didn't have any dashboards. I Here's the thing is I knew it was important.
Right.
As you know, yeah, I was like I was one of the first people to sign up with Dental Intel because I knew it was important, but I just couldn't do it. I just, as visionary, it just to me it was too much, right? So I didn't have any checklists. I didn't have any operations, and we ran okay. But those are some key things that an integrator will do in your office. They'll help with the accountability chart, your meetings, your manage your KPIs, your scorecards, your dashboards, your checklists, all those things. They coordinate the staff roles and responsibilities, all those things that a visionary doesn't want to do, but actually will take a practice to a next level of profitability and of success. Those are the things that an integrator can bring into a practice. It's like this. So the visionary is like, I want to get there, right? I want to have this practice in 10 years. This way, I want to get that summit there. And the integrator says, okay, I'm going to create the map of how we get there. I'm going to set our pace. We're going to do this, and we're going to by year one, we're going to do this, by 3, we're going to do this, we're going to by 5, we're going to do this, right? And then I'm going to assure that the team is coming along with us, that we have consistency along the way, and that's the value of the integrator, along with the visionary in the practice.
I think a great visionary quote is, I don't know where we're going, but we're making terrific time. Right? Like it's hit the ground, right? Let's go. And it's like, let's hit the trail. And it's like, where are you going? It's like, we're just going. We're getting there. And it's like, where are you getting? And you're like, the place that we're probably going. And it's, the integrators got to be like, oh, let's map, like you said, let's map this out and figure out where we're going before we just hit the trail running. That's actually how I ride dirt bikes a lot. Is let's just go. Where we go? I don't know. We'll figure it out. And I've been home really late a lot of nights because of that.
Yeah,
Um,
your vision. If you don't have the integrator, You have a vision, that just equals chaos.
Yep.
And like it's like everything is you set off and you go down this path, but you're not organized, and it's just chaos, and then stuff happens, and then you get frustrated. Why isn't this person doing this? It's because you're not like there's no execution along with the big ideas, right? There's team
Yep.
confusion. No one's on the same page. You have a total inconsistent like patient experience. Your production is this roller coaster because we're super motivated one month and then just like forget, I don't want to, and then you're up again and then you're down again, right? And so there's no predictable growth, and that's the frustration of vision without integration.
Yeah. And I think that there are some roadblocks. Quite frankly, it's better if you as a dentist are an integrator, you're in a lot better position than you are if you're a visionary. That's the irony because most dentists are visionaries. So, but if you are an integrator, you're way ahead of the curve as far as running a dental practice. And that's just the reality of it. And I know there's some people out there, like I said, there's some roadblocks to there's a lot of roadblocks to success, but one of them is this whole idea like, don't put me in a box. You can't don't tell me who I am and who I'm not. You don't know me. And so don't label me. I'm not. And the reality is you've got to be able to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are. Yeah, it comes with a label, visionary, integrator, whatever. But the idea is that you have to understand what your strengths, your weaknesses, your limitations, where they lie. And then you need to be able to address those weaknesses and limitations and hire someone that can take care of those things. I think that it's very, very common for a visionary to, like you said, to try to play both these roles and get stubborn and just bury the head in the sand and say, no, I'm not the problem. It's not me. It's my team doesn't do things. And then there's the other barrier, which is micromanagement, which sneaks in a lot. So I talked about how an integrator is important, but it's also beware of that because an integrator can turn into a micromanager where they want everything done a certain way and no, you're doing it wrong, let me do it. So it's a slippery slope on both sides, and this is why it's important to have the team, to have both, to have a visionary and an integrator. Don't just want the one in the office, you really need to have two. And I know that's daunting if you're, I mean, so Jared, how does somebody that's new doc, maybe just bought a practice, or someone that's coming in and running a skeleton crew, how do you figure that out? Like what do you do if you don't have both?
That's a great question. You need to first, identify. I would say first is you need to understand the value of both. First of all, if you're like, well, I
Yeah.
can do both, you need to first be like, okay, and you need to be like, at first, you need to be like, you need to be really honest with yourself of who you are, what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and you have to be okay with them. So, if you're an integrator, you're talking about how an integrator is good, and you're further along the path, which is great. But if you have integration without vision, you're probably going to be stagnant.
Yeah.
You can have great operations, right? And you're going to have, but you're probably not going to progress. You'll probably be pretty steady. You're probably just going to produce that 1.1, 1.1, 1.1, whatever it is, year after year. So you need to understand that there's value in both of them. And then, and then once you need to figure out what your role is specifically within the practice. So you need to first identify you. Who are you? Do you create vision? Do you create the long-term goals? Do you generate ideas for growth? Are you the inspiration of the team, or do you execute these things? Do you drive the scorecard? Are you KPI driven? Do you hold the team accountable? Who are you? And then once you identify that, you need to identify everyone else in your practice. Do you have the opposite person already in your practice? Right? Do you have an office manager who's a great integrator? Do you have an office manager who's a better visionary than you are? Do you have this yin and this yang already within your practice? And if you don't, Where can you find that, right? Do you feel like that, generally speaking, because of the nature of being a dentist and being an entrepreneur as meaning a private practice owner versus a dentist who isn't. Do you feel like that by nature, most of these entrepreneur practice owners are more visionaries?
Yeah, totally. 100%. Yeah, it's I mean, like I said, if you look at a sampling, we've got a pretty good sample size now at Elevation Association, and the vast majority, if that's your if it's appealing to go off and do your own thing, right? To be your own boss, to own your own practice, to take on those levels of responsibility. And we get that that's not appealing to everybody, but for those of us that it is, we're almost always visionary, or at least a visionary component. It's pretty rare that someone that is that entrepreneurial is also an integrator, like we were saying earlier. I'm thinking of one specifically, that we've had out at our outfitters course, who's a fantastic integrator, and he's a really successful um, practice owner. He inherited the practice from his dad. So it's not like it can't happen. It's not like you can't have, an integrator in that role as an entrepreneur, but it's by and large, visionaries take over that realm, and it's something that, um, I don't think that's gonna change, and I think there's a lot of concern about, oh, private practice is dying, which kind of it is, but I think there's enough of us out there that are gonna keep private practice viable, and that's why it becomes so important. If it's gonna stay viable and we just keep beating this drum and sound like a broken record, um, if we're going to keep private practice viable, we've got to get good at these basic things, right? And so, like, if you are a new practice owner, if you just started up, I like what Jared said. You've got to understand your role. First thing, figure out what you are. Find out, am I a visionary? Am I an integrator? And I think we kind of know in our hearts. For those of us that are a blend, it's a little harder. We're like, I don't know what I am. We have a test, like Jared was saying, that you can take. But when you're small, knowledge is power, right? And you've got to focus on the basics, getting the schedule filled, take care of, make sure the bills get paid and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean you can't be strategic in your planning. That doesn't mean you can't start to go, there's the peak that we want to go get to. I want to get to that peak. I'm a visionary. I want to get to that peak. Right now, I can't afford to hire, anybody other than this assistant and, my front desk person. Well, that's fine, but when you hire your front desk person, are you being strategic in your hiring? Do you have a test that you can give them to find out, are they a visionary? Are they an integrator? I'll tell you right now, if you're everybody assumes that their office manager has to be that other role. It's not always that way. I love that Jared brought up that his wife is an integrator, because she really is an awesome integrator. And she played that role so much before, well, not even before I got here, but after, we got here as well. She'll come in and say, Jared, she jokingly calls herself the dream crusher, like we were kind of joking about earlier. But it really is something that she's like, "Hey, guys, have you thought about this?" And it's really good for her to come in and interject, thoughts that we haven't even like put into our, field of vision at all, and got, oh yeah, we probably should take that into account. And so maybe it's your spouse or your boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is that, that you work with, that can fill that role. But at some point, you've got to be strategic in getting that role filled. And that's the point, right? You need to have that role filled. And that is one of the primary roles that you need to fill as you're moving forward with the practice. It has to be done. If you don't, you're going to have a bigger struggle along the way. Doesn't mean your practice won't grow. It just means you probably won't be as strategic, and you probably won't have things as organized as they could be. And things just kind of start happening. And then you start becoming subject to the practice. And then instead of the owner walking the dog walks the owner. And things get out of sorts and imbalanced.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to do, and part of the reason why we run this Elevation Association, is we like to work with practices and help them see what that looks like. A lot of times it's difficult to know how that interaction should happen between a visionary and an integrator. And a lot of times we step in temporarily to play the other role. So sometimes, a lot of times, like you said, there's a ton of visionaries out there. So a lot of times for a temporary time, we'll step in and play the integrator role. Say, hey, here's your KPIs, here's your numbers, here's your scorecard, here's your meetings, here's how you do this stuff. And we step in temporarily so they can see that the owner can catch the vision of, oh man, this is such valuable information, so important for my practice. Um, but unlike other coaches or consultants, we're not, that's not a permanent role for us. Like we want to help you find that role in your practice so you can take that off and run with it and do that. But it's really fun to work with the practices and help them see there's a whole nother side, whether it be the visionary side or the integrator side, right? If you're the integrator, we will help you sit down and create your vision and work through this. And you come to the outfitters course and you work with you, Dan and I work with you, whatever it is. And we help you open up your mind to that vision to see what the possibilities are. And then you can help fill that role with somebody else at some point in time. But it's a fun way to do it. One, kind of a fun way to maybe distinguish between a visionary and integrator is a visionary will make 3 to 7 big decisions per year. Really, I mean, it's just like we're not decision makers, right? We have ideas, we throw them out there, and we hope something sticks and somebody takes it. An integrator will make 3 to 7 big decisions per day almost. And so it's like, yes, we're making this decision, we're moving forward, or no, we're not doing this. We're come back and whatever. So, that's a lot of kind of maybe a fun distinguishing feature between visionary and an integrator as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's pretty dang accurate. Yeah, it's not like visionaries just run around and don't make any decisions, but you're right. A lot of times it's big decisions, um, and but those are hard decisions, And for a visionary, sometimes it's easy. I always my visionary comes out in odd ways. I am I will hem and haw over a $30 purchase. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I won't blink an eye to buy a $75,000, $80,000 truck. I'll be like, yeah, of course. It's an easy decision. But it's funny how those times, these difficult decisions for visionaries can be very, very easy. The mundane, the small things, we can get bogged down in the details of it all. We can't make these little decisions. And like you said, that integrator can see it really clearly and be like, oh, here, let me break it down. This is easy. So yeah, I love that. That's part of that yin and yang, right? How it plays out. Um, I think I think we should probably talk a little bit about the synergy that exists, and we've been talking a lot about these two roles. But when you add trust and clarity, you get that synergy, right? And I like that you brought up, the whole the decision making, versus making sure that meetings happen, integrating systems and these protocols like we were talking about. But um, a couple things that are absolute must, like these things must happen, is that you have to have the visionary and the integrator meet every week. It has to happen. They have to define the lanes that they're in. That's really important. That this whole idea of like, what are your roles and responsibilities versus what are my roles and responsibilities? And share the wins. Like it's like, oof, this can be bad if ego sneaks into this. And this has to be a team win, as in the integrator and the visionary share the wins together, because the reality is that it's usually both parts contributing to the success of what's happening. And then I love this idea of like, if we're going to use our analogy or this picture that we're forming of climbing a mountain, you've got to be able to give each other oxygen, so support each other along the way and make sure that, you pick up the slack here and there and continue to be each other's champions. That's really important that role, those support system is part of that relationship, right? It can't be overlooked that this is also a support network within itself.
Yeah, the reason why they have to meet weekly is because the visionary needs to stay grounded. So, because I promise you by the next week, they'll have thought of 10 or 12 other more things, and they may have moved on to this idea in their head. And if you wait a month before meeting with the integrator and the visionary together again, visionary's forgotten completely about the thing that they brought up they were excited about a month ago. It's just the way we are. It's very frustrating for an integrator to be like, "Hey, whoa, we talked about this. We were going down this path." And there's like, "Oh, that's right. That's we were." It's very, very frustrating. And so the visionary has to, and for a visionary, it's hard to meet on a weekly basis, just because they're oftentimes off to the next thing, excited about whatever it is. And so it's important they meet weekly on the same page. I mean, that's a must. And then, like Dan said, you got to be like when the plane when you reach the summit, that's a shared win. Like everyone is involved. The visionary may be the spark, but the integrator really is the glue that keeps it together. So
Yeah.
you need both. Like running a car, you need a spark to get it going, but then you need something to keep it going while it's on. And so you really need both roles in a practice. They both matter. Both roles are incredibly powerful, and every practice really needs to clarify this within their framework of who plays each role, what their lane is, and how they're gonna stay together.
Yeah. I want to give my favorite example of a visionary integrator team. It's actually Lewis and Clark, and most of us know the story of Lewis and Clark from elementary school. Um, I love reading about these guys and reading their journals. They're fascinating. Lewis was a visionary, Clark was a integrator, and it was fascinating to watch the synergy that existed between these two men and what they were able to accomplish. They only had one person die on that incredible journey that they made to the Pacific coast. And he didn't die. He died because they think his appendix burst. He didn't die of like some, lack of leadership. It was a freak medical condition. And these guys working together, the synergy that existed between those two brought an incredible level of organization, direction. They were able to accomplish what seemed probably impossible at the time. And it really is, as we look at Lewis and Clark, they're always mentioned in the same breath for a reason. So which is more important, visionary integrator? Both. The answer is both. The right answer is neither or both. They're both equally important. And I just would encourage anybody that wants to see what that synergy looks like in action to go and read up on Lewis and Clark and just learn about what that looks like, because that can be taken and put into a dental practice. That seems like, oh, that's a far stretch. It's not at all. And that really is what it can be accomplished when you have that duo working within a practice. Is the sky's the limit. Things can be accomplished. You go from having a okay practice to having a phenomenal practice. And you go from, we call it the good enough practice, right? Well, it's good enough. Everything's good enough, to having something that's running at like a fine-tuned machine, like a fine-tuned watch, right? And so this concept, it can't be overstated. And I know I keep saying that. It's because it's that important. So please take the time, go to our website, take the test, figure out what role you are, quiz your crew, find out what roles they are, find the yin to your yang. If you don't have one, go out and hire one. It's that important. Yes, it's worth the cost to have that person within your office, within your framework, to be able to take your, not just your practice to the next level, but your quality of life, your quality of work, the things that it'll make work way more enjoyable. It frees up your time. It makes you way more efficient. So these are the qualities and the outcomes of having this dynamic duo in your office. So please take the time, do this. I know I sound just, I can't say it enough. Figure these roles out, get it done. So yeah, we here at EA, our whole goal is to help dentists climb higher. And again, don't do it alone. Get the right people, get them in the right seats, follow the right trail. and you'll get to the summit you're trying to achieve.
You want to find out more, reach out to us down there outside. We can sit and have a conversation. Reach out to us.
Or on our website, and come see what the tribe is all about, and come be a part of us, and come contribute, and
Is now a good
and
time to tell you were muted for half of that?
was I? Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
imagine that it was awesome. You missed the best part.
Dude, I could hear you, but they couldn't hear you, and, like, I don't just keep it a secret now. I don't even think you should share that again. Like, let's create some intrigue and mystery of what did Dr. Hill just say just now? Was it I mean, I think it was life-changing.
It probably wasn't worth even listening to. So let's close this podcast and be done. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Awesome. Nice cheers. Take care, everybody.